In recent years, political divisions in the United States have sparked bold discussions about secession and alternative governance. Some states, like California, Oregon, Washington, and Vermont, have even been imagined as candidates for leaving the U.S. to join Canada. This idea arises from a growing frustration with federal policies and a desire for governance that aligns more closely with these states' values. But what does this mean for the people involved? In this video, we'll explore why such ideas are gaining traction, the challenges they present, and what impacts they could have on both local citizens and international relationships. Historical context. The concept of secession, or the act of withdrawing from a political union, has long been a part of American history, often evoking strong emotions and debate. At its core, secession reflects the tension between local autonomy and centralized authority, a theme that has shaped significant chapters of U.S. history. Most notably, secession is linked to the American Civil War, a conflict rooted in profound disagreements over slavery, states' rights, and the balance of power between state and federal governments. The Southern states' decision to secede in the 1860s was a declaration of their belief in the sovereignty of individual states to determine their laws, including those regarding the institution of slavery. However, this assertion came at a devastating cost. The war claimed the lives of over 600,000 individuals and deeply scarred the nation, reshaping its political and social fabric. In the war's aftermath, the federal government firmly established its authority, rendering secession widely regarded as illegitimate under U.S. law. Yet, the Civil War is not the only example of secession in American history. The Texas Revolution of 1836 offers another perspective, highlighting the fight for independence. In this case, Texas successfully broke away from Mexico, forming an independent republic before joining the United States in 1845. This unique historical background has made Texas a focal point in modern discussions about secession. Even today, some Texans continue to advocate for independence, drawing on this legacy of self-determination. This dual identity, one of independence and federal integration, has fostered a distinct political culture, keeping Texas at the forefront of debates about the balance of state and federal power. In more recent times, secessionist rhetoric has resurfaced in other states, albeit in different contexts. Movements in California, Washington, and Vermont, among others, have emerged as expressions of dissatisfaction with federal policies. These movements often stem from economic, cultural, or ideological differences between state populations and the federal government. For instance, California's Calexit movement reflects frustrations over national policies on immigration, climate change, and taxation, with proponents arguing that the state's unique identity and economic strength justify greater autonomy. While these modern secessionist efforts are often symbolic or used to highlight grievances, they reveal a deeper undercurrent of discontent in a diverse and multifaceted nation. The modern political climate in the U.S. The political climate in the United States today is deeply polarized, fostering an environment where unity seems increasingly difficult to achieve. This division extends beyond mere differences in opinion, shaping a societal landscape where consensus feels like a distant goal. Partisan media, the rise of social media echo chambers, and inflammatory political rhetoric have created a feedback loop that magnifies differences while minimizing common ground. As a result, many individuals and communities feel disillusioned with the federal government's ability to address their needs, leading to discussions about drastic alternatives, such as state secession, and the exploration of new governance models. One of the most notable contributors to this polarization was the presidency of Donald Trump. His administration's policies and communication style alienated many progressive-leaning states, intensifying feelings of disconnect between state governments and federal leadership. States such as California, Oregon, and Washington have long expressed dissatisfaction with federal policies on critical issues like climate change, immigration, and healthcare. This dissatisfaction has often translated into discussions of secession, not necessarily as a realistic option, but as a symbolic statement against what they perceive as an out-of-touch federal system. The idea of secession is not confined to progressive states. In Texas, a state with a unique cultural identity and a long-standing history of advocating for autonomy, secessionist sentiment has been a recurring theme. Some Texans feel that their values and priorities are increasingly incompatible with federal policies, which they see as overreaching and unsympathetic to their state's needs. Movements advocating for Texit, a proposed exit of Texas from the United States, frequently gain traction during periods of heightened federal-state tension. These state-level frustrations highlight a broader trend: the desire for greater autonomy and governance. Many states are now exploring alternative approaches to governance to better reflect the unique needs and values of their populations. This could involve seeking exemptions from federal regulations, pushing for greater state control over resources or advocating for constitutional amendments that redefine the balance of power between state and federal governments. States considering secession. In recent years, discussions around secession and alternative governance have gained traction in certain regions of the United States, reflecting growing dissatisfaction with federal policies and governance structures. 4 states stand out in these conversations: California, Oregon, Washington, and Vermont. Each state brings its own unique political identity and motivations to the table, driven by a mix of cultural, demographic, and ideological factors. California, the most populous and economically powerful state in the U.S., often feels out of sync with federal policies. Known for its progressive stance on issues like climate change, healthcare, and immigration, California's urban hubs such as Los Angeles and San Francisco heavily influence its political ethos. Many Californians view federal policies as a barrier to implementing the progressive changes they envision. Movements like Calexit highlight a desire for independence, aiming to allow the state to operate without federal interference, particularly in areas where it sees itself as a global leader, such as technology, environmental innovation, and human rights. Oregon's political landscape is a tale of 2 worlds. Urban areas like Portland are bastions of liberal values, with strong support for environmental protection and social justice. In contrast, the state's rural regions often feel marginalized, perceiving that their needs and concerns are overlooked in state and federal governance. This urban-rural divide has fueled interest in greater autonomy, with some rural areas even advocating to join neighboring states with more conservative governance. These tensions have sparked grassroots efforts and petitions calling for a reimagined governance structure that better represents Oregon's diverse communities. Washington shares much of its political identity with its West Coast neighbors, emphasizing progressive ideals in healthcare, environmental sustainability, and social equity. Cities like Seattle often lead the charge, championing innovative approaches to governance. However, dissatisfaction with federal policies has sparked discussions about alternative governance models. Some proposals include forming a new state or aligning more closely with Canadian policies, which many in Washington perceive as more in tune with their values. These ideas, while not mainstream, reflect a broader sentiment of frustration with the limitations imposed by federal oversight. Vermont, though geographically and demographically distinct from the West Coast states, shares a deep sense of political independence. Its small population and tightly knit communities foster a unique identity that often runs counter to federal norms. Vermonters have long championed grassroots activism and local governance, with some advocating for secession as a way to preserve their way of life and resist federal overreach. The state's focus on sustainability, community-based decision-making, and self-reliance underscores its interest in exploring alternative governance structures. These 4 states illustrate a broader trend of disillusionment with the current federal system, driven by varying but overlapping factors. From progressive urban centers seeking greater freedom to innovate, to rural regions desiring more representation and autonomy, the push for secession and alternative governance reflects a growing recognition that the one-size-fits-all model may no longer serve every state effectively. While secession remains a controversial and complex idea, these discussions open the door to exploring new frameworks for governance that might better address the diverse needs of the American populace. Joining Canada, the alternative governance. The concept of states or regions seceding from their current nation to join another or establish an independent government is a complex and multifaceted issue that touches on economics, politics, culture, and law. The idea of alternative governance offers the opportunity to rethink how societies are organized and governed, but it also raises significant challenges and uncertainties. One potential advantage of secession is the ability of regions to align their governance with local values and priorities. For example, states like California, Oregon, or Vermont, often recognized for their progressive policies, might find alignment with a country like Canada, which is known for universal health care, robust environmental protections, and inclusive social policies. Joining a country with such policies could lead to an improved quality of life for residents, such as better access to affordable health care and a greener, more sustainable economy. On the social front, alternative governance could mean a shift toward a political climate that more closely reflects the values of the region's population. For areas feeling out of sync with their current national policies, whether on immigration, LGBTQ+ rights, or social justice, this could create a sense of belonging and progress. However, this transition could also result in a loss of cultural identity and traditions tied to the original nation. Integrating into a new governance system might feel alien to some, leading to resistance and a sense of displacement. Politically, the shift to alternative governance involves significant changes. For example, moving from the U.S. federal system to a parliamentary system like Canada's could present challenges for residents unfamiliar with the new structure. Parliamentary systems operate differently, with a prime minister instead of a president and varying processes for passing legislation. These changes would require a period of adjustment in education for citizens and officials alike. Legally, secession is fraught with obstacles. In the United States, for instance, there is no clear constitutional path for a state to leave the Union. Such a move would likely trigger lengthy legal battles, requiring negotiations over borders, citizenship, and economic agreements. Questions about the status of federal assets, military bases, and shared resources would further complicate the process. Even if secession is successful, forming or joining a new government brings its own set of legal and logistical challenges. Public opinion and reactions. The idea of secession, the withdrawal of a state or region from its larger governing body to form its independent entity or join another country, has sparked an intense and diverse range of public reactions, especially in states like California and Oregon. These states, known for their progressive values, have seen a noticeable shift in public opinion regarding the concept of secession or even joining Canada. Recent surveys indicate that about 25% of residents in these regions express support for exploring independence or the possibility of joining Canada. For many, this sentiment stems from frustrations with federal policies and decisions that seem disconnected from the values and needs of the people in these states. For residents in California and Oregon, some of the key drivers behind this desire for independence are disagreements over national policies related to issues like climate change, healthcare, and social justice. Many believe that they would be better served by a system of governance that is more in tune with their progressive ideals and local needs. They see secession as an opportunity to implement policies that reflect the values of their communities, without being constrained by the broader political landscape of the United States. Political reactions to the idea of secession have been mixed and highly polarized. On one hand, some local politicians in these states have openly supported the notion of secession, seeing it as a means to reclaim autonomy and create a government that better aligns with the wishes of their constituents. They argue that the current federal system often overlooks the interests of certain states, and secession would allow for more localized decision-making. On the other hand, many national leaders, including conservative politicians, have dismissed the idea as unrealistic and potentially damaging to national unity. These critics argue that secession would fragment the country and create instability, both politically and economically. This divide in political opinion has fueled an ongoing debate, with each side presenting compelling arguments about the benefits and risks of such a drastic move. In addition to the opinions of political leaders, grassroots movements have also emerged in favor of or against the idea of secession. On one side, organizations like the California National Party have gained traction, rallying supporters around the idea of self-determination and independence. These groups emphasize the importance of allowing states to govern themselves without interference from a distant federal government. They believe that secession could provide new opportunities for progress, allowing states to create policies tailored to their own needs and priorities. Conversely, other grassroots organizations have strongly opposed the idea of secession. These groups argue that breaking away from the United States would be detrimental to the people, creating unnecessary divisions and potentially leading to economic and social instability. Instead of secession, these groups advocate for working within the existing political framework to bring about the changes they seek. They believe that engaging in the democratic process and pushing for reforms at the federal level is the best way to address the issues they face, without causing irreparable harm to the unity of the country. The idea of secession and exploring alternative governance reflects the growing discontent with the current political system in some states. While the desire for greater autonomy is driven by different factors, it also raises significant challenges. Whether it's joining Canada or forming independent governments, the complexities of such a move cannot be ignored. It's clear that this conversation is far from over, and as the political landscape continues to evolve, the question of how best to balance local autonomy with national unity will remain a crucial issue. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to explore more controversial topics, be sure to watch my other videos.